So the Buddha's kindness. This is the 7th talk in our little series of talks on the Buddha. There's a very moving scene recorded in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta amongst the long discourses, the Digha Nikaya of the Pali Canon. The Buddha is in the last hours of his life. Ananda, his cousin and constant companion of the last, 25 years, leaves him for a short while in the company of other monks. And we find Ananda leaning on the doorpost of his lodging, weeping and saying, "I'm still a learner, with so much still to do, and my teacher who has been so kind to me, so compassionate to me, will soon be gone." The Buddha notices Ananda's absence. He asks the other monks where Ananda is, and they tell him what's going on. The Buddha asks them to tell Ananda to come to him. And the Buddha says to Ananda, "Enough, Ananda, don't weep and wail. Haven't I taught you that all compounded things must eventually come apart? That whatever is born must die? How could I not pass away? For a long time, Ananda, you have been constantly with me, serving me with great love and kindness. You've made great merit, Ananda. With just a little bit of effort, you will soon yourself be amongst the fully enlightened ones." And the Buddha went on to address the monks around him, praising Ananda for his care and sensitivity and the great love and respect in which so many monks and nuns and lay followers held him. And we get a real sense of the mutual love and kindness flowing between the Buddha and Ananda. And it's on the Buddha's kindness I want to talk today and to focus on a couple of talks that illustrate this. The first is the story of Kisa Gotami. This is a very well-known story, even outside of the Buddhist tradition. It's not actually found in the suttas, but in a commentary to the Therigatha, the songs of victory of the enlightened nuns. Kisa Gotami means skinny Gotami. Gotami was her family name. She was a thin, young woman from a poor family. They couldn't manage much of a dowry, so it was difficult to get her married. Eventually, a wealthier family took her on. We're told her husband was actually kind to her, but the other relatives gave her a very hard time, worked her really hard, especially because her dowry had been so small. But then in time, a son was born, and she was very happy as a mother, and her relatives started to treat her with greater respect because she provided a son, an heir for the family. Her son began to grow up, but before he was very old, he got sick, and despite all Kisa Gotami's greatest efforts, he died. She was distraught, driven half mad by her sorrow. She refused to accept that her son was dead. She wouldn't allow the relatives to take away the body. She clung onto him, carried him on her hip, and went around begging people to give her medicine to save her son. And we can just imagine the different responses. Some just wanting to get away from this half-crazed woman with her dead child, just ignore her, avoid her. Others would have been embarrassed, not knowing what to say or do. Others would be trying to be kind, reason with her, but getting nowhere. The Buddha was actually in the vicinity at that time, and someone, taking pity on Kisa Gotami, suggested she go and see him and ask for his help. So Kisa Gotami found her way into the presence of the Buddha, tearful, bedraggled, still clutching her dead child, begging him to give her medicine to make him better. The Buddha looked at her, took in fully what was going on. Yes, I can help you. For the medicine, I need a mustard seed. Kisa Gotami was ready to rush off. This wouldn't be difficult. Every household would have a jar of mustard seeds ready there for cooking. One thing, though, the Buddha said, the mustard seed must come from a household where no one has ever died. Yes, yes. And off she rushed. At the first house she came to, they were very happy to give her a mustard seed. But then she remembered the condition and asked if anyone in that household had died. Please do not remind us. Please do not remind us of our sorrow. The living are few and the dead are many. And so she went from house to house, village to village, and the answer was all the same, always the same. People were very ready to give Kisa Gotami a mustard seed, but death had touched them all. A parent, a spouse, a child, a brother, a sister, a grandparent. The living are few, but the dead are many, seemed a constant refrain. Gradually, as she went from house to house, Kisa Gotami came to realize that she was far from alone in her sorrow and that death was an inescapable part of life. She looked at the much-loved child in her arms and was able to accept that he was dead. She took his body to the cremation ground and made her farewells. And then she came back to the Buddha. Have you brought a mustard seed? He asked. The seed has already done its work, she replied. And she asked him to accept her as his disciple and ordain her as a nun. And meditating in the forest, she was soon to share in the love and wisdom of the Buddhas. So we see great kindness, great wisdom in the way the Buddha responded to Kisa Gotami. Realizing that words would not be enough, he set her a task that allowed her to really see the universal truth of death and accept for herself her own son's death. And another story illustrating the Buddha's kindness. The Buddha and Ananda were doing their rounds, checking on the monks to see how they were getting on, probably during a rainy season retreat. One hut they came to, they entered and found a very sick monk, weakened by dysentery, collapsed and lying on the floor in his own excrement. The Buddha went over to the monk. What's wrong, friend? I have dysentery, Lord. I'm sick and very weak. But have none of the other monks helped you? I am of no use to them, Lord. The Buddha asked Ananda to fetch warm water. Together they bathed the monk and then lifted him onto his bed, the Buddha taking his head and Ananda his feet. Making sure he was comfortable, they left him to rest. The Buddha now immediately called a gathering of all the monks in the neighbourhood. When assembled, he asked them, "Are you aware of a sick monk in that hut?" "We are, Lord." "What's wrong with him?" "He has dysentery, Lord." "Is anyone looking after him?" "No, Lord." "Why are other monks not looking after him?" "Because he's no use to us, Lord." Maybe he was a bit of an awkward character. No special qualities, the sort of person who could easily go unnoticed. If we're honest, how many people might we think of in this way? They're no use to us. The Buddha responded strongly to this. Monks, you've given up everything to follow the spiritual life. you no longer have parents or relatives to look after you. If you don't look after one another, who will look after you? Just as you would look after me, your teacher, in the same way you must take care of one another. If your brother is sick, you must take care of him. If a sick monk has a preceptor, that preceptor should look after him till he is well again. Or if he has a teacher, the teacher should look after him. Or it could be somebody he lives with, or one of his pupils, or someone who shares the same preceptor or teacher. And if there's no one obvious to take care of a monk, then the responsibility falls to the whole community. From now on, you must regard this as a firm rule of training. Monks, you must take care of one another. So the Buddha's kindness could also be very practical and also very uncompromising in the demands it put on his disciples and in their practice of kindness.